Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give people another 2 minutes to hop on today, and then we will start.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hi, Susan. How are you today?
Fine. I apologize. I had to go back and find where the Zoom link was. I had not tracked that well.
No problem at all. I was just giving people a few more minutes to hop on. I did get an email that one person was running a bit late today,
Okay, that's
and
fine.
then we will kick it off.
Sounds good to me. How many people are you expecting today?
It really just depends on people's work schedules. It can be a little bit tricky, and I'm glad that Tammy was able to hop on and be with us today, and that means she got the link, which is great. And I also think coming in on a Monday is just kind of a busy time. We're all just trying to catch up.
Yep.
But while we are waiting, we will do our we usually start with intros and icebreakers. So I'll do that. So my name is Dr. Joanne Roberts. I'm the lead consultant for the Vital Communities ECE initiative. The icebreaker today is, what was the last trip or vacation you went on that was for a positive reason? And I share that because we got in at 2 a.m. last night. We flew in from Georgia to Burlington and then drove home. And we were at my niece's wedding in Georgia. And it was never been to the Atlanta area. It was really nice to do that. And it was great to have our family all together. Haven't seen each other for a while. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Great. How are you today?
Great.
So I guess that reminds me, I did a great summer trip early in the summer to Newport, Rhode Island for the wedding of a family friend. So it was fun to stay in Newport, get to go out on a sailboat, and then to experience a very spectacular wedding.
Fantastic. My family has a couple of houses in Newport, and that's where we've summered for a long time.
Really? Oh, how
Really
wonderful.
beautiful spot.
It
So
sure
that's
is.
great that you got to visit, spend some time there. Susan, would you like to join us with our icebreaker? Last time you had a chance to go somewhere fun.
Yes, my husband and I were lucky to go to Ireland at the end of September. and we hadn't traveled in quite a while for various reasons, and we had a really lovely time. We were in Belfast and then also the West Coast, where they call it the Wild Atlantic Way. We had a really good time. Beautiful
Sounds
country.
wonderful. Yeah. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Good morning, I'm well. I'm Anna Hubbard. I'm the project manager of the Early Childhood Education Initiative at Vital Communities. I last week actually went on a bike ride. It was 280 miles northern Vermont. We took 5 days to do it, averaging around 60 miles a day-ish. It was very wet and rainy and cold and hard. And exhausting, but it was my kind of fun. So I feel refreshed and ready to stare at a computer screen again.
Great
Glad you got it
accomplishment.
back. Yeah. Hello, Damien. How are you?
Doing well. I'm Damien DiNicola. I'm on the board of Vital Communities and GMEDC, and part of a childcare project that we're working on down in the Randolph area. Last vacation that we went on this summer, we took the kids to the coast of Maine, first to Algonquin to break up the trip, then up to Acadia and stayed in Bar Harbor for the rest of the week after that. We're heading back home.
I love that trip. It's such a great one. Hello, Tammy. And hi, little one with you. How are you doing today?
Good. Just getting them settled for bed. She's on her way. But
Oh.
I thought I would share that my husband and I met when I was 18, and my husband was good friends with this particular individual. He got married 2 years after we did. So we've been friends for 42 years now. And the four of us went to the Grand Canyon in May. And it was such an experience. It's something everybody should do. But it was also like a bonus because we were spending good times with what were, our young adult lives friends. So that was an experience in itself. We really enjoyed it.
Was there a particular side?
We did the North Rim. So, and that I mean, it was the whole thing is beautiful. If you can make it, go. I mean, we even hiked down into the Grand Canyon and did some slot canyon tours. And those were spectacular.
Must have just opened up then in May, because the North Rim opens fairly late in the season, right?
Yeah, it had, but we had beautiful weather. It was actually hot.
No, it's a great time of year to go. The last time we went, it was around the same time, and it was perfect because not much in the way of crowds, and it wasn't too hot. So it's a good time.
Yeah.
Looks like we lost Joanne, unless Joanne, is that you calling in?
Hello. Yes. Planes, trains, and automobiles. You gotta love virtual. So I apologize. I hit something on my laptop and it's doing something called memory training, which I didn't know it could do. So I'm gonna hop on with my phone and try to keep things going as best as I can. Thank you for your patience. So Tammy made a great introduction between me and Susan, and I was really excited to make this connection because what we want to do as part of this work is support ECE as a profession. And I'm really curious, Susan, if you could give us some background. I know that we connected with Anna to be able to show some slides. And what I'm hoping that we do as a group is think about some takeaways that we might want to add to our own advocacy and support for ECE. And perhaps, Susan, you can give us a little bit of a background.
I absolutely can. I bet Tammy
Thank
could
you.
do that too. It's nice to have her on the call. How long would you like me to talk? And do you want to time for Q&A? I know we're starting about 10 minutes late and we had said 1 o'clock, but don't tell me, give me a time frame here.
I think if you could do, a 10-minute or so overview and then a Q&A, that would be great. Some folks here have the background information and some are new to the work that you're doing.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share with you some slides that we recently used to do an update for the Vermont AEYC board. And we may not use all of them, but I'll sort of pick a selection as we go through just to give you a sense of an overview, and then we can do some Q&A. So let me screen share. And let's see, view. So the National Association for the Education of Young Children is the national organization. Vermont AEYC is the affiliate. And starting in, 2018, somewhere around there, NACI established a Power to the Profession task force, which was made up of a bunch of national organizations in the early care and education field. And so they began to look at what would it take and what would it look like for early childhood education to become a profession. And the culmination of their work in that phase was the unifying framework, which is the foundation for all of the work that we've been doing in Vermont. And if you aren't familiar with that, it's a really important foundational document. And so we were kind of, I think we've all in all states sort of known the child care system was not, that it was fragmented, that it wasn't working. So we kind of had our eyes on what was happening nationally. And in Vermont, we've been working through 3 phases. And I should start by saying, in case you didn't know, I am the project coordinator for advancing early childhood education as a recognized profession, which is a initiative of Vermont AEYC, and Let's Grow Kids has been a very important partner in this. So you kind of think about this in 3 phases of the work that we've done. Back in phase 1, which was 2018, 2019, and that was actually before the unifying framework was published. We've always approached this in kind of an inquiry-based kind of stance, asking a question. And the question in phase 1 was, what might be the will of the workforce to pursue this idea of a profession, to find out what it would be like, what it would entail, what would be the work that would need to be done. So we had these conversations that we set up all over the state with some cadre of trained facilitators, and they went out and tried to get to every region of the state, really focused on the participants being in the workforce. So people who were working with young children on a regular daily basis, and presented this information about a profession. People were, I think, initially shocked that as if we were saying you're not professionals, and that really wasn't the message at all. It's what professions have in common. Here's what it would entail to move forward. And we did a bunch of surveying, and you can see the results of phase 1 was that people really wanted to pursue this and to advance as a profession. So there was a real commitment to, act on that and to keep reporting out on what we were learning. In the second phase, which I think we've only recently come out of that, even though it looks like it was 2 years ago. We took that unifying framework piece by piece by piece. We established a task force of which Tammy is a member, 16-member task force, all people who are working in the workforce directly with young children. They were family child care educators. They were working in center-based programs. Some of them were directors. We had someone from higher ed who was training early educators. So that group was meeting once a month, and it basically took the unifying framework and unpacked it one piece at a time, studied that piece. So you can see the first one was professional identity. Came to consensus about what they wanted to put forth as a document for the workforce to look at. Did the task force support the unifying framework? So then those went out. We had conversations all over the state. We followed it up with surveying. I'll show you the results of phase 2 in just a minute in kind of a quick way. But just to describe the way that the task force was working: professional identity, 3 designations, aligned professional preparation pathways, compensation, and now we're really at the point where we're looking at necessary supports and the bridge. And then phase 3, which we are in, and I'll share a little bit more about that later on, is, the question in phase 2 is, would the workforce choose to align with this unifying framework? And as you'll see with our data, we did get the message back that they would. And so the question in phase 3 is, how is it going to work? What are the structures? What are the supports? What's it going to look like? So that's really the part we're wrestling with now. It's complex systems change. It's fascinating. So let me just go into the next slides and give you a sense of each of the pieces. So the way these slides are set up, you can see at the top what that part of the unifying framework was. You can see the duration of time within which we were studying and surveying the workforce. You can see the number of participants who actually came to these presentations and participated in something we call a conversation with intent, where we hear from everyone. And then you can see the number of surveys. And then down the left-hand side of each of these slides, you'll see what the sort of details of that piece were: name, role and responsibilities, the place of the profession within the broader field. And down the right-hand side of each of these slides, you'll see the percentage who either strongly or agreed or strongly agreed that this was something they would support. So that was professional identity. The next one is, 3 designations. So you may be familiar with the term early childhood educator 1, 2, and 3. There are aligned preparation pathways in terms of what each of those designations would entail for preparation. And then there's a scope of practice and the idea that compensation and responsibilities increase as expertise increases. And again, you can see the support that we heard back from the workforce when we went out with this information. The third one was professional compensation. And here it was not so much at this point the dollars and cents, but the principles behind what that compensation should look like. So the idea that it be comparable for early childhood educators with comparable qualifications and so forth, regardless of setting, whatever setting they were working in, that there be a provision of an adequate benefits package, that with increased preparation and competencies, the compensation should increase, and that it not be, that's interesting numbering, I didn't catch that before, 1121, right? That it not be differentiated based on the basis of the ages of children. Because as we know, in some cases, people working with infants and toddlers have been paid at a lower rate than people working with older children. So it was the principles. And I think you'll see as we get a little further in, but I'll mention it here, as we started to do some design work, once we had agreement to these different pieces, we had a design team that worked on developing a draft proposed compensation scale that included a benefits package and was built around these 3 designations. And interestingly, in the childcare legislation that was passed this past spring, there was a provision for there being a tiered compensation system, which really aligns well with this. And the study group that started to work on that is including some of the folks from Vermont EYC and Let's Grow Kids who worked on that design. So it's exciting to see that some of the planning and design work we've done actually may be informing what's going to happen. The next piece we looked at was steps to licensure, and just to kind of, this comes from the unifying framework, and the idea is that this be there be 3 parts to this: that the individual will have completed an approved preparation program for whatever designation they're pursuing, including field experiences, that they pass a national assessment to demonstrate competency, and that they then gain license to practice from a state board. None of this is in place right now. If this is a proposed. So none of this is in place, but this is what the unifying framework proposes. And I should just mention too that the intention is that this be a national profession, not state by state by state by state. That's where it's headed eventually. But this was the proposal. And so the task force studied this piece, the part about professional licensure. I won't show you this, but if you're interested in seeing some of the videos that we created, this was the one that was put together for professional licensure. They're great ways to get complex information across in a really approachable format. So it's been a real strength of the project that we've tried to develop different tools as we go along so that we can get the word out in as many different ways as possible. Oops, let's see if we can get that to advance. So here were the results of going out to the workforce around professional licensure. And you can see that there was support. And, you know, I think sometimes when we went out with these different discussion drafts, we weren't really sure what we were going to hear back. And in every case, it was really a combination of a high degree of support. And we also always ask the question, what concerns you or raises a question for you? And if there were particular ones of those, which there were each cycle, where there were a bunch of people who said, here's a question I have, or here's a concern I have, we made sure to reflect that in the eventual consensus document and not to lose track of that as we move into design work and implementation planning. We've got to keep in mind not just that there was support, but some of the concerns that were raised and how are we going to address those as we move forward. So I mentioned to you, we're in phase 3 now. And so this is really about the workforce working with the ecosystem. That's a term that comes from the unifying framework, and it means agencies and different nonprofits, and anybody who holds a piece of the early care and education system. And so we've got to make sure that we're not just handing this off to agency and policy folks, that it continues to be workforce informed. One of the convergent expectations we've been really clear about, and this is in the unifying framework, that requirements not be raised without compensation also being addressed. And sometimes that's been a weakness in systems change efforts, that qualifications might be raised, but there isn't an accompanying increase in compensation to a professional compensation level. I mentioned design teams. These are just a few of the design teams that we've had working on different pieces in the last few years. And so the career pathways design team has done some work looking at, what's the way that people are going to move through these pathways. We've looked at, we had a higher ed folks from the different colleges and CCV who were working in that second design team to start to look at how could they align their programs with the professional standards and competencies, and how could they also kind of collaborate across programs. We had a team that was working on what an ECE1 preparation pathway might look like. I mentioned the compensation study design team. And then I want to say just a few things about this notion of a bridge. Part of what the unifying framework makes a strong commitment to, and we agree with as well, is this idea that there has to be a way to respect the experience and expertise of current members of the early childhood education workforce who may not have the credentials that the unifying framework is describing, and yet may well have the competencies and expertise to become licensed educators. So we're trying to figure out, and I have to say, I think Vermont is ahead of many other states in trying to figure this out, so that the National Commission is sort of looking at us and saying, how are you working with this? What are you thinking about? But we've got to figure out a way for those experienced folks to transition into licensure and into the workforce and into the profession. We did a pilot a year ago, piloting a kind of a portfolio process, and learned a lot from that. It wasn't quite what we were aiming for in terms of what that bridge should look like. We are also studying model legislation that was developed at the national level, that they're going to be sharing out with states, so that if as their policy and legislation changes, there's a template for how to go about that. And we are in the process now of designing a second pilot for how experienced educators will move into the profession. This is just a quick list of all the different ways we've done outreach and communications. We're very committed to keeping the workforce engaged and informed and hearing from them, and have built up other groups beyond the task force. We have ambassadors who are also well versed in this work and are able to talk in their communities about it. And I don't think I'll do lessons learned and guiding thoughts right now, because I want to make sure you have time for questions. So let me stop talking and get out of the slides. I can come back to that if that's something that you would like to spend time on. So you have questions, perhaps?
That was really helpful. Thank you. One of the questions I have, because Vital Communities is the New Hampshire and Vermont side, Vermont has taken great strides moving forward, and I'm just wondering who facilitated these meetings. They sound amazing, and I wondered if it came through Vermont AEYC, who facilitated, or did you have outside consultants come in? How did you pull those together?
So I'm trying to think about at different levels. When we first started, we recruited, I think we had a study group, and there were a few members of the study group who were interested in facilitating. In fact, that group, we did a test round before we ever started going out in a large way. And we had a script and we had slides, and so we'd sort of had a package of, we wanted everyone to get the same information. So we recruited people who were interested in being facilitators, and they were members of the workforce who said, yeah, I'd like to do that. We had an orientation session with them and went through all the materials so that they felt comfortable. And then we had Rachel Hunter, who's been our outreach coordinator, has done all of the, a lot of the outreach and scheduling, interfacing with different groups so that they sort of know her, but then she might or might not have been the presenter, the facilitator. And we tried to pick people in different regions of the state, especially when we were live. So, there wasn't a lot of traveling. Since the pandemic, we've stayed with Zoom because that's very convenient for people. So I don't know, does that answer your question in terms of who the facilitators were?
Yeah, that was very helpful. Just trying to picture how it got pulled together, and then with the legislation that has come through, Emily from Let's Grow Kids gave us a great update at one of our last steering committees, because I think there was thoughts about, if Let's Grow Kids sunsets, where will this land? And it sounds as though that was a thoughtful process too, and that many of the people involved with Let's Grow Kids are in positions to help continue and sustain the work that's been happening, including a lot of the work that Vermont AEYC is doing as well.
Yeah, so two things about that. One of the ideas we had right from the beginning was that there needed to be a container organization for this work. Yeah. And so I think Vermont AEYC has largely been that, and their capacity to be the container and do a whole bunch of things has grown tremendously. I think Let's Grow Kids has helped with that, to build their capacity. So that part of that is that sunsetting, and how do you stand up and build up other organizations to be able to take on. And Vermont AEYC was a natural organization to do that because it is the professional organization. So it makes sense for them to be the ones leading the work to establish a profession.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Other questions for Susan in regard to the process or her slides? Julie?
Susan, I'm just so fascinated by this work and the history. And I think I neglected to say I'm a project director with Early Learning New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, our world is so completely different. So I just look at this work with tremendous envy and appreciation for the quality level of the work that you've accomplished. And it's hard to wrap my head around how we could do something similar in New Hampshire, where our AEYC affiliate actually gave up its charter several years ago because we did not have a robust organization. So now may not be the time, but I'd love to hear some of that history and your take on why Vermont AEYC has been able to be such a strong organization to be able to do this important work.
Well, I have a whole bunch of ideas. One is we're just about to present at NACE in a couple weeks, and framing that presentation as part of it was the partnership of these two organizations. I think Let's Grow Kids and Vermont AEYC together. I don't think either of them could have done it by themselves. Let's Grow Kids move the needle on so many things, but I feel like this wasn't going to happen until we got more workforce leadership and engagement. So there's something about that partnership and, collaboration. I also, we've been involved with other states who are doing this work as well. There have been some peer learning cohorts, and it seems like who's leading it is really different across the states. So it would be interesting to talk with someone at NACE. I could help you connect, or maybe help figure that out together, about what are some of the different leadership pictures around the country. I know that we've talked with Maine a little bit. Recently, I got someone in touch with me from Hawaii, and so and I'd like to go there and consult with them directly. But Hawaii, in a lot of ways, is not unlike Vermont and New Hampshire in being fairly rural, not having a heavy population. So maybe it's a matter of doing a scan of what is there in your state and who the potential leaders could be. It could be higher ed. It could be, again, a partnership, just to say how could it happen.
And I think it is reformulating. I'm encouraged because a staff person is now affiliated with Maine AEYC, trying to resurrect New Hampshire. And those conversations have been happening with Early Learning New Hampshire. So that's all good. It's just that we slipped so far, but now there's this opportunity to rebuild. So I think we can learn from what you've done and from what some of these other states that you're talking about. So thank you.
I'd be happy to help you, and so would anyone else with our project. And partly, I think we have to make a commitment. If this is going to be a national profession, we have to help each other as states, because we've all got to move in that direction. And one other thing, you used to have a really robust shared services network. I wonder if there's any possibilities. And I'm just off the top of my head, I don't know whether there's any possibilities for leadership somehow through that network.
And that's actually that's some of the work that Early Learning New Hampshire does with the shared services platform. So I think there are opportunities there.
We just had a overview at one of our meetings last week from Jackie Furman, who is that rep that Julie's referencing. And the good news is that they're going to do 2-in-1 over the next year as they're pursuing their New Hampshire, I guess, accreditation or affiliation. They are applying for a second avenue as well. Amy, can you remind me what that is, so that it's actually going to happen quicker rather than 2 years? They're doing something where they're doing both in a year. Do you know what those are, Amy? I just
Yeah,
remember
it's
that.
something to do with the national piece. I don't
Mhm.
remember. Just was
But where I
don't
think I
really
could
understand.
help, yeah, where I think I could
I
help
didn't understand
you.
why it sped it up, but somehow,
I think they used to have to wait for 2 years, and they're going to do two things within 1 year, and be
Yeah.
able to have New Hampshire kind of stand on its own at the same time as doing the national level, I think is what I gleaned. But where I can help from Vital Communities is facilitating meeting with Susan and Julie and whomever you think from LNH, Jackie Furman, Amy, anyone else who would want to shoot me an email to learn from each other and to really get that cohesiveness of our states working together so that we're kind of lifting and pulling each other along at the same time. And I think that in New Hampshire, we have been behind, but there's a sense of urgency now that I
Mhm.
don't know if it necessarily was there. I want to say 3 years ago. And sometimes that makes things progress at a quicker rate when you can learn directly from someone who's just walked the walk. So I'd be happy to make that coordinated meeting and to learn from Vermont, and also connecting, with Hawaii or anyone else that you think might be a great Zoom call to kick it off, to say where are these states and where are we heading. We also have, Susan, an advocacy committee through Vital Communities, and we are looking at places to launch. There's the bi-state legislative meeting that's coming up through the Public Health Council that we'll be attending. We've been working with Dartmouth College and Dartmouth Health. They're very interested in supporting this work because they're losing employees. And they want to also kind of nudge into the area of housing as well, because those two things have had, their hand in glove, and they're impacting so many people in so many different ways. And we don't want to forget that quality part of early childhood education, and focusing on that as well. Tammy, did you have anything that you wanted to add about this work, since you've been part of it and a great resource for us in these meetings as well? Anything to share or questions that you might have?
The only thing that I would just add to Susan's comments is that I was introduced to this advancing the profession concept by the work that Rachel Hunter did by bringing it to our provider networks. And that's how I was introduced to it. And I feel like that got the momentum going for the whole project. It was that first step out there into the field and getting the positive responses back from everyone saying, yes, we're educators. Why aren't we considered educators? Was the question being asked. It really got all the members in my network, and two others that I belong to, really involved, and it became part of our discussions. And most of us meet every month. And so they're always asking me, what's the latest update? Where are you? That kind of thing. So, New Hampshire has networks. Amy's got one. I would say start there, bring it to Amy's network and find out what all the other networks are, and go there and start getting the momentum that you need to push this forward, because you're going to need not just the people that are in this profession working to make this happen. You're going to need lots of other people, as Susan alluded to make the whole thing come about.
Thank you for that. Damien?
Yep, and I've got two questions for you, and I'm only going to throw them at you one at a time, so I don't throw too much out at once. But the first question is how much the issue of competition with public school compensation and came up during your evaluation process, and how much of your work involved figuring out how you deal with the losing people who are interested in education to the public school systems, because that's something that we hear comes up a lot, especially as you increase standards of professionalism, that people get better accreditations, but then they move to the public schools, either due to their scheduling or better benefits and compensation programs. Was that a major part of what you were evaluating as part of what you were developing, or did it come up at all during the process?
Oh, that always comes up, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it did. So it's good. But
It's something, I mean, I think if anything, this is going to help that dynamic, because isn't that a historical issue, right? That as
Yeah.
people are looking for, and or even leaving early childhood education to work at, a fast food restaurant, which pays better than some hourly than some programs do. So, but I think what we did was said that, remember that slide that said that the compensation must increase concurrent with any qualifications? That's different, right? If you just increase the qualifications and folks are then saying, oh, well, I could go over there and work in the public school, then that leads to the flight. But if you increase compensation at the same time, it helps to address it. And the way the wage scale work was done was, it was, sorry, I'm being a little all over the place with this. Let me back up. The unifying framework recommends that as wage scales are developed and compensation packets are developed, that we look at public schools as a point of comparability. And we know that early care and education programs are not 10 months of the year with, shorter days. So part of the way they built that scale was to take into account the fact that they're longer days, more days, right? So that should raise it up. I don't know if I think the short answer is that it seems that this new system that we're aiming toward should ameliorate that dynamic of people leaving for the public schools. The one other caveat I'd say is this was a big deal in the legislation that was just passed. There was a proposal to move to universal pre-K for all 4-year-olds based in the public schools, and drop it for 3-year-olds. I don't know if you know that we've had 10-hour-a-week pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds for a number of years. And there was lots and lots and lots of testimony from community-based programs, family child care programs, that this would really, blow things up for them. And so the legislature did take a step back and said, we're not going to address this. We're going to form a study committee. We really want to look at this and be thoughtful about it. So there's always that sort of, it's like a mobile. When you move one piece in the mobile, it's going to affect something else. And so I hope, and we hope, right, they're going to be thoughtful and careful about any decisions around that, because that was a big deal. Tammy, I don't know if you want to speak to that, but they heard a lot of testimony, maybe from you as well, on that topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly that's been a huge topic.
My network wrote in a letter, and I'm working closely with Rebecca Holcomb. I don't know if you know her or not, but I've been working pretty closely with her with some other stuff that I'm doing. And she shared that letter throughout, and said that that letter and the testimony that they received is what put the brakes on them moving forward with that. And they realized that there are a lot of unintended consequences that they didn't weigh. And my understanding is that this new group is going to have members that represent the different areas in our field, so that everybody can understand fully what the implications are of making a change to having the 4-year-olds incorporated in full-time into the school systems.
So that may have been more than you asked us, but yeah, there's a lot. You had a second question?
Yeah, the second question, I don't know if this gets beyond the work that you're involved in doing, but I'm curious if what you're working on the implementation side is starting to get involved in the whole chicken and egg problem with this, is what we view it as, is, you know, in order to have people interested in going into the profession and get trained, you need programs with these compensation scales and the business models in order to pay these the increased compensation and benefits and everything else in place. Yet it's difficult to get those programs started in place until you have the employees and the workers ready to work in the program. So it's you know, for someone who's trying to develop a center, you know, our biggest risk, we have plenty of kids out there and parents looking to send their kids to a center of whatever size we can build it. But we're not going to be able to have the staff available on day one, and maybe not even on year one or year two or year three. So, you know, it's how do you know, in order to attract that staff and to get them interested in doing the profession, you need the programs out there who are ready to hire them. But in order to have those programs, they have to be built and they have to be able to survive long enough to show, you know, to be there when these folks come out of school or training or wherever they're going from. So that's, you know, my best way of explaining the chicken and egg problem that we're dealing with. And I don't know if what you're working on gets into that issue, but it strikes me as a really important part of it.
I have two thoughts. One is, it's really, I feel this too. It's like we have to keep a foot in the old system while we're trying to put a foot in the new system. And it's messy and complicated. So I don't know the answer fully, except it's just acknowledging we're kind of living in two systems. The other thing we heard strongly from the workforce when we went out with some of these cycles that we did was that they thought this would help attract people and recruit people into this profession. And we know that there are higher ed faculty who, in advising their students historically, have often said to them, you know, if you have a choice, go get your licensure and your endorsement as a elementary educator. You know, I can't in good conscience tell you to aim for working with younger children because you won't be able to pay off your student loans. You know, so I think that's not a full answer. I don't know what the true answer to the chicken egg thing is, except it's just going to be messy. And I think we have to not let the chicken egg derail where we're trying to head for, right?
Yeah, and then I guess I'm saying is looking at, and it's a challenge of who, you know, what groups we need to get together to look at that issue and figure out how we create the bridge between the two programs to make it actually function and work in the least painful way possible for existing programs, because it comes up in two factors. You know, the one is if for a lot of these compensation scales to work, the business models really need that economy of scale. I mean, they really rely on having, for some of these programs, more kids in the program, which requires more staff. But to get that more staff, of course, you need the folks available to work there, which is going to take time to develop as these things all work through. And then the other thing that comes up is if we are successful, for the programs that are successful at creating the better compensation earlier and attracting these folks, for folks who are pre-existing who aren't there because they either don't have the economy of scale or other issues of where they're situated, maybe in a more rural community, those folks who are already struggling for employees are going to have even increased challenges. And that's really highlighted with our project, where we have our potential organization that's going to be running it has an existing facility in Tunbridge already, but they're dealing with the issue of, if we get this new center up and running, even if they're running it, how are they going to be able to have enough people who are still interested in working at their Tunbridge facility? And those issues are going to come up across the board and are going to require some work and work well in advance in order to find a way to make the bridge.
And maybe part of the game changer is this doesn't happen without increased public investment and really starting to see early childhood education as a public good, not as a private thing that parents pay for. And, there's some subsidy involved, but it's going to take significant changes in how we fund it. That may level the playing field some across some of the different programs that you're describing.
And I think that's a critical point, Susan, because what you've laid out in your thoughtful work is building the infrastructure to create this kind of new system that we need. And then that key point that it can't be done without substantial subsidy. It can't be done just through economies of scale in operations. The funds needed are massive, and that's going to take public investment to get there.
And that takes us right back to the beginning, which is this whole notion of professional identity, and being, if we can say these are skilled professionals, these are special skills, not just anybody can do this. This is a distinct role. It has a noble purpose. We make a much better and stronger case for that public investment than some of the assumptions and historic pictures that people have in their minds about what this all is about. And so we've been working really hard in our new workshop that's coming out at the Vermont AEYC conference is about implementing professional identity. Tammy's going to have a piece in that. This is about who we are and what we do, and this is really important work. With all we know about brain, we have to educate the public if we're going to expect public funding. And so that's why it's been so helpful to have Tammy and other task force members, other members of this workforce testifying to House committees, Senate committee, talking with their local legislators, writing opinion pieces for newspapers and, being on the radio and so forth. And that's part of the ability to be advocates and to speak in informed and articulate and passionate ways. That's part of what we've created through this work. And Tammy sort of referenced how it got started and the way people came into it, and that grows over time, so that we've got a lot of voices who are talking about this, not just people who sort of typically wear the advocate role.
I think Vermont also knew we had to have an ask. You can't just go with your problem. Policymakers don't create solutions. We need to have a cohesive ask that we know will kind of tick off a lot of boxes. And one of them was the professionalism piece. And it makes sense to align with professional licensure. If we want compensation like professional licensure, then we need to align to professional licensure. And this is kind of where I get stuck in New Hampshire, that it's more than just asking for money. It's about those other pieces that, we hosted Rachel in 2018, 2019 at our meetings, director network meetings, to talk about this.
Any other questions or thoughts for Susan while we still have her here? And thank you for extending your time to be with us today.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Thank you so much. And I have written myself a note to reconnect folks and find a time when we can get together and share these ideas and maybe begin to talk about that national hat, but bringing in the alignment of Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont. You mentioned Alaska. Hawaii. I was thinking Alaska, but Hawaii. And building on each other's work. I see, and it's the same in public education. We work in silos a lot, and that isn't necessarily the best way to get things moving ahead. And it sounds like you've made great strides. Could you possibly share your slides, Susan, the ones that you shared with us, so that Anna and I can push them out to the folks who couldn't be part of this meeting?
let me just title them and tweak them a
Yep,
little bit since
sure.
they were for the Vermont EYC board. I'll send them to you and you'll
Mhm.
share them.
Please,
And
that would be
Tammy,
great.
I want to thank you, Tammy, for inviting me to come. And I am not kidding when I say, boy, Tammy has a lot to say about all of this, and I'm glad that she's a member of this group. She brings a lot.
You're welcome, Susan. I'm glad you came because you can speak better to the whole process than what I can.
Well, we complement each other well.
Right.
So
Thank-
yes, I'd be happy to send the slides. Thanks for the invitation. Don't hesitate to get in touch. We're happy to collaborate and help in any way.
Thank you so much for your work. And I know it doesn't always feel like it, but you're making a difference for so many people. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
That was so helpful. Thank you. Like I'm running out of paper. I wrote so many notes down and connecting circles and loops, but you know, to hear people who are in the, you know, the walk of it and talk about it, and that it is messy, but then there are solutions. And I think that's what I take away from this is, yeah, it's messy, but you get people like yourself, Tammy, and others in this group that are experts in the field who want to see improvement and who are willing to work together to share ideas. It's just so important, right? That's what we kind of need to do to work together as a group by state. I do have a few notes in regard to our agenda today. Sean's not here, but one of the things I gleaned from our conversation, I've called it the Lebanon ECE Center, and I think they have a more formal name of I think it's the Early Learning Center of the Upper Valley. So if you happen to hear of that down the line, I think that's now what they're calling it. They had a brief presentation. I was unable to attend, but it sounds as though they're making headway. They're going to be looking for funders for the actual Capitol building project for the Early Learning Center of the Upper Valley. The design of it is really neat. It's very environmentally based as well as part of the concept, which is pretty neat. And hopefully he can give us an update a little bit more down the line. And Damien, you shared a bit of what you're experiencing in regard to staffing. Last time we saw you, you were still jumping through those hoops for funding. How is that going?
Well, it's not surprising if we move from cross off one challenge and then we move on to the next one. So finally our USDA funding, kind of the official documentation, which was taking forever, came through, which gets us to the point where we can go out and seek those bids for actually building the project. But now it's gotten so late in the year that not surprisingly, as challenging as it is to get a decent amount of decent bids to do the project in the timeline we had originally planned, that was viewed as a challenge to begin with. And we're so late in the year, we're really have a low level of confidence that we'll be able to get somebody who can build the project based on our initial timeline. Right? So we had multiple initially interested parties, and many of them have pulled out, and we're not sure if we're going to get a bid, or if so, from how many. So we're reevaluating, well, if we can't get it done on the timeline that everything that was based on, which we needed to have for our grants, okay, what does that mean for our funding? Can we extend that timeline out for 6 months to a year to build in more time for the build without jeopardizing these interconnected funding sources? And what does that mean for the funding? What does it mean for also the business plan for when the center could be open? Because of course we can't start repaying loans until the place is up and running, which gets tied into the hiring and everything else that's out there. So it's a good example of how all these different complicated factors interact, and every time there's a small delay or change in the process, it creates this kind of snowball effects of things that we have to go back and say, how do we make this work, and can we make this work, and what decisions can we make? So can we delay the USDA funding for 6 months to a year? And what does that do with our other funding sources? And what does that do with our providers' ability to, stay in the project and so on? So that's our current challenge that we're in the process of evaluating. And so that's probably the big one out there. Aside from, again, on the shorter time frame, if we do stick with our initial schedule, then we also have the issues with the provider as well, and being comfortable that they're going to be able to find the staffing and folks to ramp up in enough time with maintaining their current program with the struggles that they're having there since COVID. So that's creating other issues as well, especially since and due to the COVID delays, the staff and directors and even a lot of the board members with our provider are completely different and new than the folks we started with at the beginning, which creates other challenging dynamics, because the folks who originally came on board and committed to it are completely different now and facing different challenges. So,
Damien, what was your original timeline, I'll say, to have the doors opened, and what are you looking at now? Because I wasn't here, I don't think, in the beginning.
By original, or at least right now, all our projections were by next fall. So the idea was the beginning of the next, summer fall cycle to be open and ready for that cycle. So we don't have a new timeline yet because we're not sure, but we're thinking if we can't get the bids in, then we'll have to go back and look at, okay, what time frame can construction providers actually be attracted to, so we can get at least a couple of competitive bids from some of the decent providers out there. So, and then how does that affect the business model? Because of course, opening a program in December is different than opening in August or the fall. So, which is one of the reasons where we're shooting for that. And then do we delay for a whole nother year? Does that make more sense than trying to open in the fall? And then what does that do in terms of our provider? So always a lot to look at. And of course, this is our original time frame was, I think, 2 years ago. So
Oh, all right. So it's been in the works for a while. I know. I mean, one of the positive things that might come out of that, if you have to wait another year, the cost for building materials is going down. So maybe, that would help. I know that from our public school
hopefully it'll
experience.
reset. I mean, if we can do it with our funding sources, I think there are a lot of reasons to wait. The big challenge with all this stuff is it takes years of work to get all these funding sources in place, and you have to go forward with a schedule and lots of different boxes that you have to check, all the evaluations and the environmental studies, and there's multiple sources. So we have to see, can we just put those on hold, or are there any things within any of these statutes or deadlines that would make it impossible, or to have to lose or redo any of the work we did on those funding sites, which of course, those funding sources, which of course is extremely expensive and takes a lot of man hours and cost just to get through it. So, so we're in the process of trying to figure all that out now. So
Definitely sounds complicated and I guess also frustrating to get to one point and then circle back just to get to the next point. I know there were some conversations just about the timeline and the staffing. Any questions for Damien about that project from folks who are here? Or
I'm just curious, you may have said before, Damien, what's the square footage size of the facility you're contemplating?
I don't know it off the top of my head in terms of square footage. It's 80 to 90 child center plus
good
rooms and everything. So it's
great.
a decent size, 2 floors of a large building, plus rooms for other things that OCCP does, community work and different programs. So
great.
Does a lot and pretty big outdoor floor outdoor area as well. So it's, what was originally a $3 million project when we started is about a $6 million project with
Wow.
all the
Wow.
renovations, if you think about the build costs, and that's just the same facility, same size. That's just with
Unbelievable.
increases in costs and everything that have happened since we did our initial evaluations of the site pre and early COVID to now.
I believe that was Sean's challenge as well. His new
Mhm.
numbers are up another 3 million, I think.
Yeah, everything, the COVID delays, increased in prices, they just snowballed everything, and the government funding sources, which were all slow to begin with, are even slower, which increases the costs and delays, and then it's just this kind of cyclical effect that makes it a real challenge, because we're constantly waiting, then suddenly we get a go, but then everything's changed, so we have to resubmit or reevaluate that, because all our grants and applications were based on different numbers. So it makes it for an interesting process.
Well, talking a bit about staffing needs, how is the career cultivator going with your new cohort?
Going well. We thought we lost one with a broken arm, and he actually came back and is able to complete it. I think the cast is already off 3 weeks or something. So yeah, I believe we're gearing up next week or 2 weeks from now to go down and help rate resumes and start with interviewing skills and talking about potential placements. So there will be another 11 entering the field. One of the challenges with this group that is reality is that their personal struggles are front and center in their lives. And that means when they're in this training, they're struggling to navigate personal issues and gets in the way of the training. So we're having to take another look at the program. This is what it's about. It's about morphing and changing and accommodating. And although we offer free childcare, housing, transportation, all of these things continue to be barriers. Substance use issues, just things that come up. And what we are looking at is actually embedding Getting Ahead into the program. So the Bridges Out of Poverty program, Getting Ahead, embedding that into the program. So we've decided to kind of catch up with it right now and do something that we're labeling like a book club, which they will be compensated for upon completion. But within the next cohort, we're going to be we're learning how to screen better and kind of understand the group. First group was not tech savvy. It was the generation we were working with, for the most part, struggled with a lot of that. This group is another age group for the most part, and they're very tech savvy, but they don't have study skills. So cumulative information, when they go to test, they very much struggle with it. They're doing great with the hands-on piece, with the classroom practice piece. They're catching on incredibly quickly. But this is a college level course now, so they do need to show those skills. So we're having to accommodate and change the way we're teaching a little bit to make sure that we're breaking it into smaller pieces and placing it more on competency based than like testing out of something. So, but it's looking good. All 11, that'll make 27 through the program. I believe they're in the sub pool now. They couldn't wait to get in the sub pool, so this group is running in the sub.
Fantastic. And is the ECA using those subs in the sub pool? Because that was a conversation that came up a couple months ago, that we had subs, but they weren't always being used or something like that. Are you
Yeah.
finding that they?
No, I mean, they're still running. I think providers are frustrated when they ask to fill up, a slot and it doesn't get filled, and then they just don't bother doing it. We did this time let them know the day that we were reloading the sub pool.
Great.
There's a few in there, but this was like 11 going in, and making sure to connect with them and get them to post jobs. So I don't have the data from the past from the first few weeks in the sub pool. So I'm not sure if they're being fully utilized. I hope they are.
Thanks for the update. Any questions for Amy about that? There is a possibility of Mark coming perhaps in November. He was a person who's working with seniors and wanted to connect with us to let us know that he is out there with senior solutions and would love to make connections with resources of providers with seniors. The research is definitely there about the benefits for all involved with that process. And if for those who might not have heard, Amy and I met in May with the Hartford Area Tech Center. We just met last week, and they are under their Human Services Program umbrella going to be offering a program that includes early childhood education, which is a great thing. We've talked about, is that a possibility? And they're actually going to do it. And the students who come out of that course would have Vermont and New Hampshire background experiences. I don't know enough about the certifications. I know enough to know I don't know enough about them, that they're different in both states. The requirements are different, but we're heading toward that direction. And that will be fantastic. And they're also tapping into middle school and early high school students to try to get interest early on. So we're excited about that. I wanted to ask this group a question based on Sean's schedule. So Sean and Amy were the original facilitators for this group. Based on Sean's schedule, he's not sure if he's going to be able to make it twice a month. And I asked this group, if you remember, we were two separate groups. We were facilities, and then I think it was program models, and we decided that we were combining a lot of the same information. So we went to one group. I'm wondering if you want to continue to meet twice a month, or as a group, it would be best use of your time at this point to meet once per month, but there might be meetings that come out of it, like the one we just talked about, connecting folks with Susan Titterton, like on the sides. You might end up having two meetings based on what one meeting leads us to in the next direction. And I just wondered your thoughts, if you wanted to continue to meet twice a month or once a month. And I will schedule our next meeting and just give you time to think about that. And it doesn't mean the work isn't happening and progressing. For me, it's best use of people's time. And it might be that we do a monthly meeting and then these sub meetings happen, and then we come back, the next month and say, oh, by the way, we met back with Susan Titterton. Here's what's happening with, Jackie Furman and EL&H and, that group, and things like that. So no pressure to give me an answer today. I'm just want to facilitate as best as I can, which means just being flexible with the people in the group and what your needs are. So something to think about. Any other business for the meeting today, or topics or people you want me to try to connect with for future meetings?
Joanne, I may have missed, I was just curious to know what's happening with the group that was, working on food issues.
Sure. Anna, do you want to give an update on that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. Pam took a vacation, I took a vacation, so things have kind of been dormant right now, but we are meeting on Friday with two partners from New Hampshire, Kate Graves and Nori Mena. They both work for UNH, I believe. And right now we are figuring out if we were to put all of our findings so far into a report, what that report would look like, what the audience would be, how useful it would be, and then figuring out the timeline for that. And then also we were exploring possibly holding a workshop at NOFA, which is Northeast Farmers Association, New Hampshire. I attended NOFA Vermont's winter conference last year, and there was a workshop on farming, on farmers that have toddlers, young children, and how they were navigating ECE while farming. And it was very intimate. There were some folks that cried while sharing their stories. It was a really nice, safe space. And I would love to hold something like that in New Hampshire.
Great.
So relating to food.
And just to share, I think when Jackie Cowell was at one of our meetings, she shared that the early childhood platform has food resources. So we would just want to make sure that providers are aware of that and can tap into that through the platform as
Another
these other
piece,
things are developed.
right. Another piece I think that came through our thread from the survey is the needs are very different. So they're different by state, but they're also different by provider. So there wasn't, in general, a one-stop shop. If we did this, we would be benefiting X, but it might be that we have 3 pools of needs. So how can we meet this need, that need, this other need? And our original thoughts walking back, I remember I was talking in the summer. So it was that long ago, was connecting restaurants and having pre-prepared meals delivered. And what we learned from that is there's not a lot of time. So even if all the meals were delivered, there's not a lot of time for the providers to then reheat or remake the meals to the point of actually benefiting either the providers or the children. So that was kind of our brainstorming idea this summer. And then in talking with people, which is really important, what do you need? That wasn't necessarily the answer. It might be for some. So it kind of came up that there wasn't clarity and the needs were diverse. And so maybe connecting with the people who have, so it was interesting because it was one state had a great need for bottle warmers and another state not at all.
That's
Was it
right,
New Hampshire
yeah.
needed it? Something, was it? So it's like, what is
I
happening?
think it was Vermont everybody had them, and in New Hampshire they didn't,
Hampshire.
which was
So,
interesting.
I think that for those who are looking for that, there's some kind of grant for sure that we could do to get a solution.
And another, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Another big part of it is where CACFP comes into play. And that's also varies state by state. We met with the CACFP coordinator for New Hampshire already. She was very limited in what she could tell us just because of her job, of her position. She's a federal employee, so she can't give us opinions on on her program. But really we're trying to figure out on top of that, pun intended, menu of options that we could provide funding for centers and providers in general, would be how and if can we smooth systems between that one person who's in charge of all of New Hampshire CACFP. That's a lot. That's one person who's in charge of every single provider who's involved with CACFP. So how can we smooth that between the providers that are enrolled in CACFP? And that's huge and something that Cam and I don't know a lot about, something that providers don't seem to know a lot about, and something that the other side, like Patty and the people who are actually in those positions, can't really tell us much about. So we're navigating that as well.
Thank you.
One other thought, and let me know if this was already covered at some point in a meeting that I didn't make, or if everybody just already knows this, but do we have a good sense of, with Let's Go kids sunsetting in Vermont, of how they're, I have this general sense that they're, transitioning employees off into different roles to continue their mission. But have we heard, has there any presentation or kind of, does everybody have a good sense of what exactly they're doing, how they're doing it, how that kind of sunsetting transition is working? Or is that something that might be a potential topic for a future meeting, to get somebody from who can kind of talk about what is happening there?
We did have Emily Tenenbaum, who came to a steering committee meeting and said that their emphasis is on making sure the things that were promised come to fruition. So they are very much so not saying, okay, we're done, we're walking
Yeah.
away. They do have key people in key positions, which is great. They're already seeing mechanisms kicking in because people understood what the next steps were, but they want to be front and center with, okay, state, you said this, we're going to make sure that that actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're 2 years out. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
So they are
Right.
going to be a strong presence all the way through that, and setting up for the next term of rules and regulations review and approval. So they're thinking about the next cycle and where they want to go in advance. I was very impressed with the fact that it wasn't just hooray, now we're sunsetting. It was very structured in making sure that their new role becomes the people watching what's happening, not watching, but watching and actively participating in what's happening, and then getting the next round set. I know Emily's really busy. It took her a couple months before she could come to a steering committee meeting. Anna, would you mind sharing the minutes from that steering committee meeting with this group? I think that best way to glean that information would be to read the minutes, because I'm probably missing pieces that Emily talked about. And then I'd be happy to circle around and try to have her come to maybe a December meeting or whenever she's available to give us an update here. I think that would be really helpful.
Well, it's not a big rush, and my impression is there is a very structured, there's been a lot of thought put into it, and I don't know how much of it is public knowledge or stuff that they're ready to share or put out there in the group, but to the extent it is, it's be worth getting a better handle on, because I'm kind of hearing tidbits of it here and there from various sources, but don't have a good unified sense of it.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that. We will share the minutes and then circle around and see what her availability is to come back to this group. And that's what I'm kind of thinking of. If our monthly groups have maybe a presentation hot topic that we want to have information on, then we all give updates. And then in between, if there's advocacy work that we should be doing, or a program models piece, or workforce issues that come up, we can work on those in subgroups and then come back together as a whole group to keep everything moving forward. I don't know about you guys, but this fall just flew by. I didn't think it could go faster than any others, but oh my goodness. And a lot of great work for us to do. I will mention that Monday, November 6th is our next meeting, and that is the morning of the bi-legislative meeting. So Sean, myself, I connected Alice with, who did I connect Alice with? Maybe Jackie Cowell, and also not Jackie Cowell, I apologize, Jackie Furman, who had just given us a presentation update, and Erica. Erica's the executive director for the Hartford Tech Center, and I don't know if Erica can attend that, but there was just a conversation about what it takes for a tech center to be able to put a program forward, which connects really well with what Susan was just saying, which is they're being counseled out of going into the profession. Tech centers, couldn't call it an ECE line. They had to call it a human services line, and are trying to figure out the language workaround to support the tech center adding this program in. So they're kind of pushing the boundaries of saying, yes, the students who graduate from this program will have multiple credentials, we'll have multiple pathways, one of which is ECE. Individually, they didn't get support for just an ECE pathway. And also for students who aren't quite sure, it's kind of nice that they're getting a mixture of different kinds of programs and pathways that they could head into. So at our next meeting, I can give an update about the bi-legislative meeting that I'll be attending that morning. And if there's anything else that you want me to do to follow up with, please let me know. Once again, Tammy, thank you so much for making that introduction. That was really, really interesting. And it was so helpful wearing both states' hats to see how we can learn from each other. So I appreciate that. Anything, Amy? Go ahead.
So that Act 76 overview was actually kind of in the nitty gritty. I explained a lot of how the money's coming out, and they said it was recorded and they would send me the recording this week. So I will send it to you. So everybody.
Thank
And then the other thing on my mind is just, going back to building membership, because technically you're not building an affiliate membership, you're building an NAEYC membership, and then they choose an affiliate. So how do we support and align, if reading and I'm just thinking I'm a Vermont affiliate. I live in New Hampshire, worked in New Hampshire, and I'm still a Vermont affiliate on my unfortunately. And the reason why, all the benefits are the same. I get the books, I get the journal access, which is why I pay the memberships, because I want the professional journals. And I share those with my staff. And then I'm a Vermont affiliate because of it's a benefit. So you have to feel something. It is benefiting you, and just advocating isn't enough. It has to be something tangible, and it was the events. Discount to the events in Vermont, which are super high quality. They're things I can see and touch. That's how you choose an affiliate. So it's like, how do you sell NAEYC membership? And then how do you build up the integrity of the New Hampshire affiliate membership so that it's something tangible that people can touch and say, I choose this over others? Because I could choose Hawaii if I wanted to. If I spent summers in, Alaska and I wanted to go to conferences, I would choose the Alaska membership or whatever. So it really is a benefit. So you have to kind of frame it that way when you're thinking about building memberships. It's more than just, please, we're going to advocate for you. People
That's a
need
great
to sit
point.
and then how can we professionalize? I know UVM Champlain use NAEYC journals as the professional readings. So having our own membership, we met the authors, we published, so we became part of the NAEYC Young Children Journal, which kept me connected, at least, and my staff. And then we paired that with the what would be in New Hampshire, the GSQ now, for their credentials, is they would read journal articles that I would post from NAEYC. So I don't know, it's just thinking about how
do you think
thinking about Julie's.
Yeah, do you think
Yeah, that's a
individual
really good
states will
point.
go away and it'll just be national? Or do you think there'll always be individual states and a national?
I think they kind of, that's the benefit you feel and touch, is the state, the affiliate state. The journal's one thing, and then the events and the networks or whatever that you can connect to through your affiliate is another thing. And Plymouth was the one who was trying to do it the last time in New Hampshire, Plymouth State College, and there just wasn't enough credibility in what people were touching. You know, it didn't. Vermont's Vermont's conference is incredible. It's just so organized and it's so high level, and they have vendors, and it feels like going to a national conference. And I've been to big ones, and
Mhm.
it's like a little national conference. And being that it's connected to UVM and Champlain, and it elevates it for me.
Yeah. Amy, were you ever a member of New Hampshire when it was active? So you experienced those differences. So it'd be, again, helpful to have your perception about why New Hampshire couldn't stay vibrant. But I'm hearing the elements of what you're talking about in Vermont that are key, as you say, to building member and keeping membership. Because the quality of the New Hampshire conference, I think, used to be really good. Long time ago. I don't know how that evolved over the years. But yeah, how do you maintain that level of quality?
It never touched Vermont, because I
Yeah.
believe I started in Vermont. I tried New Hampshire because somebody guilted me into it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, this is not worth it. I'm going back to Vermont. And the
Well,
only
see, it's
reason
good.
was the discount to the conference. That's all.
Yeah. So good to hear that experience as we try to rebuild it in New Hampshire.
Mhm.
So when you're rebuilding it in New Hampshire, the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that the Vermont AEYC has taken on a much larger role than what Amy's
Mhm.
talking about now too. They're administering what's called the Sparks program for CDD. And that's critical to its members, that it's administered well.
They've also taken on the apprenticeship
They have.
and a few other projects. They've been a real steady contractor for the state.
Yeah, they do the teach program. They administer that. There's like 5 or 6
And
programs.
the loan forgiveness and some grants, I believe. So
And they have a huge number of staff. I was shocked, I think, when I looked at their website.
they have a policy director.
I know. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, they just added 12 new staff in the last month.
Really? Wow. Wow. So they must have
Funded by-
really high membership levels.
Is that how it's funded? So the memberships pay for these positions?
Well, that, and they're getting state contracts.
Yeah.
They're getting the Sparks
difference.
is
That's
the
the difference.
QRIS. The
Yeah.
QRIS is their Sparks, and that's been built, as part of this whole piece of Act 76 is just sort of like, it's a blanket. It's looked at QRIS. It's looked at alignment with, NEYC, what their early childhood levels are. It's looked at pay. It's looked at all of those pieces. So yeah, Vermont or AUIC has been positioning itself a long time for contract. It got the apprenticeship contract, Tammy, what, years ago?
Yeah.
Just at the beginning of COVID or 2019, they got the apprenticeship contract, the teach contract. Then they started this loan forgiveness piece, which Damien may save us from in the Vermont side, save for some people going to public school. If they want to get their elementary ed degree, they can do it if they work in early childhood and get it if they work for a period of time. And they'll pay off the loans, $4,000 a year.
As far as a group to get together with Susan Titterton to talk about Vermont and New Hampshire, who would this group recommend that I connect and try to get a small group together? So I have Susan. And then would it be you, Julie, and Jackie C? Would
Yeah,
that
Jackie
be?
C. I think
And
the
then
people
Jackie
you
F?
identified, Jackie Furman.
Yep. Amy. So if I make it too huge, people will pull and scatter. But what about, it was Julie who's from SCAN, and she was at the SCAN conference. She emailed me, right? Isn't it another Julie? Who's doing it?
Jillian, I think
Jillian.
Jillian, yep.
Thank you. I don't want to make it too large, but I'm just trying to get the key folks to begin to listen, right? Make that connection. Why not? You know, if Jackie's talking about a pathway, and I think she connected with two Jackies, I think have connected and talking about having provider voice kind of coming through, whoever that is, one channel, and trying to
Mhm.
organize DHHS and organize New Futures and organize all these different groups, getting people together to listen to the success and also the barriers that Vermont has overcome would be really helpful. What do you think, Tammy? Because you've been on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I was gonna offer to be part of that if you felt that my voice
Fantastic.
would be helpful.
Would love that. What times work best for you? Because you have little
Nap
ones.
time. They're all right in front of me
Time,
right here.
nap
sleeping on
time.
cots, believe it or not. I
Do you
can't
have
believe
magical fairy dust that you get nap time happening? I needed that, 25 years ago with my boys.
it doesn't always happen. That's why sometimes my camera is off the whole time. Right now, they're all sleeping.
So what is that time for you? When do-
1 o'clock until about 3.
Okay. We'll try to get it right around that 1:30 to 2:30. In case it takes a little bit longer to get them down, a little bit longer to get them back up. So I can help organize that and then coordinate with Anna your time. So maybe we could assist by recording it and getting minutes as part
I
of
would
Vital
ask Jackie
Communities.
Furman who
What works
else
for
she
her
might,
too.
Who else? Yeah.
well,
Oh.
who else she might want there. I don't know if they've talked about a secondary level partner like UNH, or I don't know if that's even been discussed, but if she has any other partners or like evolving partners, she might want to invite them. And then the other person who is pretty cool is Rachel Hunter. She's would be great.
And who is
'Cause
she,
she's
Amy?
so she's one of the boots on the ground people that helped with the Power to the Profession
Oh, okay, great.
campaign, like the introducing it to providers level.
Could you connect Rachel perhaps with me since you've scheduled things with her? And then that would be an introduction rather than, hello, I'm just introducing myself and asking you to participate in a meeting. Sometimes that little connection in between is really helpful.
I would suggest
terrific.
Marion Barter too from the Child Care Advisory Council, just because of the parallel conversations happening in New Hampshire around a wages campaign.
What was the first name again?
Marion Barter,
Yeah.
who's chair of the Child Care Advisory Council. I think, did you meet with her?
I met with her, yes.
Okay.
They were two people, Marianne and another person,
Shannon.
both. Yes, they were amazing.
Yeah, and Shannon has now become a staff person for the advisory council.
Okay.
They were able to get funding for that, which was good.
And there's the person who was in New Hampshire a very long time who retired. They said her job was posted like a month or so
Deborah
ago.
Nelson. Yeah, Deborah Nelson retired as head of the Child Development Bureau and Head Start Collaboration. And they did just hire a new person. An email went out about that from out of state.
Okay, so that position
I can
filled.
forward that. Did you
Please.
get that email, Amy?
I'm
About
a
Deborah-
little behind on my emails.
Okay,
I could have. I'll have to look through, but
I'll share
I
that.
knew it was
Please.
coming. I just
Yeah.
don't know if I actually.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I really appreciate it. Stay warm, but it is going to get warm by the end of the week. So
Good.
keep the combination of clothes going a little longer. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.